I am Dr.G.Anandhi, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce and Economics. I handle the subject Fundamentals of Business Communication. Now I explain the introduction of business communication, importance of business communication, process of business communication, and barriers of communication. First, explain the what do you mean by communication? Is the communication is derived from commun is the meaning of to share. Would you share to share an idea, feelings, and express of on your way of action that is called on your communism. Communism is an exchange of thoughts, message, or information by speech, visual signal, writing, or behavior is called on your communication. It is the transmission of an idea or feeling so that the sender and the receiver share the same understanding. What do you mean by sender? Who send the message? That person is called on your sender. Who receive the message? That is called for that person is called on your receiver. So communication is understanding between the sender and the receiver. So to two persons, you communicate with any one way of the language area, signing of an handing movement and your face expression that is called on your communication. Is the definition of communication. Is the communication is the process of involving the selection products and transmission of signs in such a way as a helper receive a person meaning similar to that the mind of the communicator. So communication, we have to select the any one way. So what do you know your language that you have to communicate to on your sender and receiver. The sender is given your one news easily to understand to on your receiver. That is in your communication. You can't understand for that in your communication. You will not do anything for that in your work. So you have to convey the message a simple and easy way to on your receiver. Then business communication means is a sharing of information within the organization that is performed on the commercial benefit of the organization. Is a sharing information. I am the one of the boss of the company. You are on your subordinator. So I convey the message in your subordinate is an easily to understand, simple and easy way to communicate the subordinate. So easily to understand that is on your communications. That yeah, what are the importance of communication? It is the professional world. Communication and related skill decide a person character curve. Is a better communication skill, is a higher chances of touching upon a success. Is a communication is very well understanding on a receiver, is a successful of the world. So he is in a world throughout the world connecting within the communications. So the communication is a best way to connect with to a sender to the receiver. In the new global and diverse workplace, require excellent spoken and written communication skill. Is a communication skill one of the written communication is the one of the best because this is the evidence of the future. Is a oral communication is not for correct way to on your receiver. For example, I say I call to on any other person by phone. I say I tell the figure is a 15,000, but the receiver you called 50,000. So oral communication sometimes barrier. So the written communication is one of the best communication to easily to understand to the receiver. Is an opponent of an evidence. That is the importance. So what are the process of communication? Is a communication is a process whereby information is encoded. Encoded is on your sender, receiver is on your decoder. Is a giving messenger is called on your encoder, receiving person is called on your decoder. Each channel, what's the channel? Email, phone, fax, these are the called on your channel and send by a sender to receiver via some medium. So all the form of communication requires sender, a channel, a message, receiver, and the feedback. The hindrance, there is no restriction, there is no bad communication process is called noise. Is a communicate on your word noisely, is a loudly to any meeting at the time 100% is immediately one place, one person talk to on your 100%, you have to loudly to say for that anyone communicate to on your receiver. There is then a process of communication. Then was the field of experience. The reason a channel is one of the important middle of the communication. For the right and left is the encoding and decoding. Encoding is called on your sender, decoding is called on your receiver. So sender you communicate to on your receiver, the response is reply of the receiver. That is the feedback, the answering of the receiver. So answering of the receiver to sender questions, the reason your feedback of the communication. The receiver is not an understanding your question. There is not a reply for on your the question. The reason you are not received for on your feedback. So feedback is a receiver receive the communicate from on your sender, reply the communication, that is called on your decoding of on your feedback. Then components of communication. Sender. First one is a sender. Initiate the communication process, developing an idea into message known as a encoding. That is and who give the message. That is called and that person is called an sender. Channel is in so many ways you have to use the email, phone, conversation, the instant face-to-face discussion, and even for a text message. These are the called a channel. So any one way you have to communicate to a sender to the receiver. Then the receiver, the messenger, and moves them through the channel to the who complete the communication process by interrupting and assigning meaning to the message known as a decoding. So receiver is in a complete of the communication. Receiver receives the communication and reply to that communication. That is called a receiver. Is called a decoding. Feedback, it is a critical component in the communication process to ensure the message properly received and interpret. So he received properly to communicate one person to another, non-stop to communicate to a receiver. Otherwise, they will not understand, easy to understand. Written communication is the best one of the best communication at a time circulate for only more than 1,000. So more than unlimited of the person circulate for only communication. Now you have to see on your news. You sit on your one place, you have to receive a world news. This is throughout the world. There is communication. That is one of the communications. The next one is types of communication. One-way communication, two-way communication, verbal. Verbal means is oral related. Non-verbal is action, expression, feeling. That is called non-verbal. Formal and informal. Formal means to follow your procedure. Informal means you have to own it with self. Upward, downward, interpersonal, intrapersonal, organizational, mass communication. These are the types of communication. So what do you mean by one-way communication? So one-way communication, transfer of information is a one direction only from the sender to the receiver. Only sender only send to the message to the receiver, not reply from one receiver. That is called one-way communication. For example, is television news. Newsreader only to read the information to communicate to on your public, but you are receiver only to watch, to listening for that and you communicate, not reply to on your at that time. That is called on your one-way communication, sir. Two-way communication means is the two parties communicate to the information, ideas, so one-to-one. That is on your two-way communication, sir. It is on your chatting of on a message and the telephone bell, calling of on another person is on a conversation is on at a time two person. That is called on your two-way communication. Verbal communication is on divided into two types. That is a language of a vehicle of communication. There is a language of vehicle communication is called on your verbal communication. Is divided into two. One is on your oral communication. Is another one is on your written communication. Oral communication means a face-to-face interaction between the sender and the receiver. Is a directly talk to the sender and the receiver. That is called on your oral communication. Is a written communication means sender use a written mode transmit to the message sent to the receiver. That is a written communication. Is any one message email sent to the receiver is at a time 100 of the persons received for one message to communicate within the seconds. So written communication, that is called on your written communication. So verbal communication means is a language as a vehicle of communication. Why do you say for a vehicle is to move to one person to another. So that is called on your vehicle of communication, sir. Then the non-verbal communication is that when a message is communicated without using a word, is in a process like a non-verbal. Verbal is in cues of transmitted and received. There is not at all used for any word. There is a face expression, hand movement, eye contact. There is an assigning language, body language. That is in the non-verbal communications. There is no vehicle of communication. It is an only expression of face expression, a hand movement, and body language. It is called on non-verbal communications. formal communication to follow new procedures. So communication take place through the formal channels of the organization, such as along the lines of authority by the management. Lines of authority, that means on a boss to the subordinate, subordinate to the boss. There is an lines of authority. That communication from one step to another step. That is on your formal communication. Such communications are generally writing and any take to the form of policy manual, procedure, rules, books, memorandum, official meeting report, etc. For example, we are all writing in an internal assessment exam. You have to receive on a timetable. So I send the written circulation to all the students. So easy to see for that circulations. So that is in your formal. So at a time when I send to all the students, we have to see for that any time. So one of the evidence I send to that in your group, one of the evidence is in your future evidence at any time. You have to verify for that in your timetable. So that is in your formal communication. Informal communication means is arising out of all the channels of communication. Outside the formal channels known as informal communication. So outside the formal channels, the reason usually talking with your friends, talking with your relative. There is an informal. There is not officially formal to proceed to follow the procedure to the communication. So friend, a relative, you are in a parent. There is an informal communication that usually oral may be covered by a simple glance. Not at all. You have to communicate a written circulation to your friend. Only for an official. That is called on your formal communication to follow on your written. But informal means you discuss with your friends, discuss, talk with your relatives and parents. So that is an informal. Is a oral communication. That is called an oral communication. So what's the difference between formal and informal? Is a formal is called an official channel. Is only communicator from an official office and administration. Is a circulate for a written communication through the receiver. Unofficial means a relative, friend, a parent. It is an unofficial. There is no written communication. It is only direct to direct, face to face. The communication is called informal. It is a planned and systematic. It is an official communication. Is properly sent to sent to the receiver. Is a date from and to circulation and the subject matter. You have to follow. But informal communication, there is no for a relationship. For a relationship, only formal. Is any directly is for that time? What do you think about to talk to your friends? For that time, if what do you want to talk to your parents? There is an informal. There is no followed planned. So at the time, instant for that communication, that is called informal. Goal and task oriented. So what do you think about for example, you have your boss. So what do you think about what is the assigned to your subordinate? You have to plan that they will circulate to your subordinate. So individual goal, what I need, what I want to talk to my friends and talk to my parents. That is a goal. There is no involved to any others. That's myself. So myself, I talk to my parents. So myself, I talk to your friend. Discuss with my friend. There is any informal. So formal is in a procedure, the official message to follow to an you have to follow it as salary. A formal is an impersonal. That is because this is a formal communication related to office purpose only. Informal is a person, because who are the person is your friends, relatives, and parents. These are the personal. Okay, is a stable and is a flexible. Is a stable is a standardized. You are not changes of your communication without permission. But is an informal is an flexible, instable. Is an at that time incident you have to talk to that. That is an informal. Is an slow on structures. Is a written communication, not at all for every time circulate the message to written circulate to the subordinate. Is when will you assign the project or assign the work for that time to circulate to one subordinate. But informal is a force and unstructured, because you discuss with your personal is a person, friends and relatives. So is a fast, is an unstructured, is an formal is a little chance of desertion, but informal is in a bigger chances. Anytime you talk to your parents, you talk to your relationship and your friends. There is an informal, but is a little chances. When will I want to only circulate anyone information for that time? Only for only circulate to only message to only workers. That is a formal. So these are the difference between formal and informal. Is a great point. Is the informal type of communication and also is called informal communication means is a personal related. Is called a great point because it's structured throughout the organization, all the direction respect of authority levels. Authority levels, what are the step of the first is a boss is a managing director, and the managing director is a manager, and a supervisor, and the labor leader, and the subordinate. These are the structure of the organization. Is exists more at lower level of the organizations. Is a lower level of organization not necessary for a boss, managing director, and manager and supervisor is not for is a large level of business is formed to for this structure. Is in a small level of not necessary for the structure of these structure of this great point. See, spreads like a fire and not easy to trace. Is easy to spread. Is an within the second to reach to all. The reason was a communication at times. That is a downward. That is the downward is the first place. Flow from your downwards. All the information in this is medium is usually in the form of instructions, direction, and orders. In the direction of communication strengthens is in a structure of the organization. That is an upward means is in a pass to the subordinate. That is a scholar chain. Is in a top to bottom. That is called a downward. Is any one communication you have to communicate to on your boss and managing director. That is in your director and supervisor, labor leaders, and subordinate. That is in a downward. So that the direction communication strength the structure of the organization. Upward means subordinate to boss. Subordinate to finish the work, to report to on your labor leader report to on your supervisor, supervisor report to on your manager, manager report to on your managing director, then finally receive for on your head of the boss. That is an upward. That is an upward. Is an bottom to top. That is called an upward. Is an lower level hierarchy for your upper level. The function of upward communication send the information suggestion. Is an compliant grievances. The lower level of worker that manages above. The reason subordinate, if anyone queries or grievances, is a report to on leader of the workers. The leader of the workers collect the grievances from on your employee, report to on your manager. So manager solve for that problem. Not at all solve for that problem. Inform to on managing director. So managing director not solve for the stage. He informed to on manager for the head of the boss, the boss of the company. There is an upward communication. It is a solve for a grievances subordinate to on your boss. It is a scalar chain, top to bottom, bottom to top. That is called a scalar chain. It is a lateral or horizontal. This type of communication takes place between person at the same level of working under the same executive. The person is same level or working under this same executive. Is in the same institution, is the working of the same department, is in a communicate on your one-to-one. That is called on your lateral or horizontal. The main use of this maintain coordination, review activity, assign the various subordinate. So teamwork is split up the teamwork for on the same department. Is in a project was divided into is in your work split. So work split is in easily to complete for on a project within the particular hours. That is a communicate within the same field and the same executive. That is called on a lateral horizontal. Interpersonal. So interpersonal means is a communication exchange of information between two or more people. That is it is the process by which people exchange of information, feeling, meaning through verbal and non-verbal ways. Verbal means is an oral and written. Non-verbal means is an facial expression and face expression, hand movement, eye contact. That is a non-verbal. So interpersonal, inside. That is a relationship between two persons. Intra. That is within myself. Within oneself, that is an integer reflection, is a contemplation of one meditation. That is in myself. So that is called an intrapersonal. So the communication is within myself, within my own self, that is called intrapersonal. So interpersonal means relationship between two person. That is verbal, formal or informal, or verbal or non-verbal. Intrapersonal within myself, that is called intrapersonal. Organizational is a process by which activities of society are collected and coordinated to reach the goals, both the individual and collective group. Any one work you have to divide it into a group of the subordinate easily to complete the work. You collect the work collect the information and distribute the work for each group, and finally collect for all the group work finishment you have to submit to an organization. Is subfield of general communication studies. It is a component to effective management workplace environment. So work spirit is teamwork is an effective workplace of the environment, because for example, one project you have to complete it within the 1 month or 1 week. You are not at all doing for only one person. So you have to split out on 4 or 5 person easy to complete for that project. So teamwork is an effective environment of the communication. What's the mass communication? Is the entire population. Convey a messaging to an entire population. Is an example is a word news and facts, cinema is internet press, and the social media newspapers, news readers. There is a radio, internet using. These are the mass communicate at the time throughout the world in front of me. That is a communicate only for news. Recently, at a time, radio and the internet, and there was various purpose. That is a mass communication. So, mass communication means is an entire populace, conveying message to an entire populace. That is called mass communications. So what are the barriers of communication? Communication is the activity of conveying meaningful information. Is a require sending a message and intent reception. So I send the message to the receiver. So we send the message to the receiver is an easy. That is a communication. Is a barrier, some obstacles to communicate, receive the message from a sender. So for example, I phone call to another person. For that time, a signal problem. I am not at all connect to a receiver. So I talk to continuously 10 times within the break, then again you connect. There is a breakup. There is a barriers of communication. So barriers means it's an obstacle to complete the certain task. That is called a barrier. Communication barrier defined as factor for condition interfere with the effective exchange of the ideas and thought. Interfere with the effective exchange of ideas or thought. That is called a communication barriers. Is any one restriction in a upward or downward communication was given a instruction the manager not properly intimate to a subordinate. So the communication not received from a subordinate, the work is not completed. There is a barrier of communications. So there is so many obstacles there. So what are the types of barrier? Physical barrier, cultural barrier, language barrier, emotional barrier, gender barrier, organizational barrier, perceptual barrier. So what's a physical barrier? So physical barrier relate to the disturbance in the immediate situations. There is any disturbance. Is I talk to you for a nearby to you, or for that time any radio sound, any music, there is a disturbance. There is a disturbance you are communicating. Is anyone public place you talk to with any convey your message to a receiver for the cloudy the cloud of the so many people of population is there. For that time the correct communication not reach to the receiver. There is one of the restrictions. Is not at all interfere with effective communication. Some of them are easy to alter, whereas some may prove that obstacles in the process of effective communication. So very crowd of these situations in the not at all interfere in correct communication. For that time, I send the message, I chat the message to the receiver. Is one the alternative for communication. There is a physical barrier. Factor causing physical barrier means defect in media, the distraction in environment, ignorance of media, physical disability. These are the physical causing of a physical barrier. How to overcome to the physical barrier? You have to update on new technologies choosing an suitable environment. Nowadays, we are all using for an online internet world. So we are all using for an online formats. The reason, yeah, what to choosing for an suitable environment. In previous days, there is no internet, there is no online use and connectivity. But nowadays, you have to use for currently updated technology. There is one of the avoid of barriers of communications. So there is a removal of communication, easier to read and compare, supplement written science with the pictures and visual sciences. So we are, for example, we are all attend the online examination. Is with you have to write in your home to attend the examination, submit the assignment, upload the camera. There is a new technology, it's a current technology. So I easily to communicate at a time, collect the for all the student examination and results, and also assignment uploaded. Is a cultural barrier. Is in a provide people's way of thinking, way of seeing, hearing, interpreting the world. Is a way of seeing, hearing. There is an interpreting. The similar word different things from people from different cultures. Is in a culture is differ from people to people. The reason a communication language also differ from one state to state and one culture to another culture. The reason a take on a language. This is the reason a cultural barrier. I am in a spoken word. I know in language is only Tamil and English, but I don't know Telugu or Hindi. How to manage to for Hindi, Karnataka? I know manage. I know I go to a bigger. So I can't. I don't know India how to manage it. So there is a barrier. So is a common language only used for the world. There is a cultural barrier. Is in how to causing cultural barrier. Is in a cultural language and scent, nature, religion. Is the religion is different from different languages and depend upon the religion. For that time, you have to use for common languages and English. You have to talk to you have to manage for religion. The reason what the barriers is an effective workshop is a frequent meeting. So the reason cultural barrier. So language is an inability to converse the language known as both the sender and the receiver. So sender and the receiver was the language knowing for that communication is a communicate to a receiver. Is an inappropriate way conversing of writing is a misunderstanding between and the sender and the receiver. I don't know the language. You have to explain for the language. I can't how well I can't understanding your what you say. I don't do. There is a language problem. So whatever know for the receiver, that language you have to communicate it easily, understand to the both of the sender and the receiver. So language is very, very important to a communicator. Then what are the factor causing of a language barrier? Is a multi-language, so many languages is there. Is the regions, is the vocabulary, is the interrupting difference. In the world, so many languages spoken. You have to for that time, the situation, environment, you have to use for language. How to overcome is a slowly and clearly clarification, easy to understanding, medium of communication, is a passion, the reason avoid to one language. Emotional is an emotional state, maybe influence a capacity yourself, understand and have an understanding of others. Is in many time emotional barrier is a face reaction easily to understand for on even a happy moment your face is and smiling, so easily to understand for the receiver. You are when you sad, say anyone is sad of a incident, you got to face is on your side of that, easily to understand for on your receiver. You not only convey any message to the receiver, but you have to understand it for your face expression. Is a hand movement also sometimes signing the hand movement. Eye contact easily understand for on a receiver. So some emotional is not on a communicate to only emotional hand movement that is not easily communicated for all the way. So sometimes some information communicated from the facial expression and hand movement. So there is an emotional barrier. Is any fear? Is any mistrust? A stress is any differ from one facial expression. The reason processing of one emotional barrier. How to barrier for that, avoid for that barriers of communication. is a motivation and commitment to change, and we are a mentor support and expressing the demonstration, some stress of the receiver, you man company to arrange the meditation class and yoga class to avoid the stress of reducing for the net stress. So you have to communicate the communication to avoid the barriers. The relationship respect gender barriers to communication. The relationship respect workplace authority and education are common ways men and women predicted against to each other. Is an overcoming barrier. Gender communication isn't just simple, but can be made clear and with a little patience of understanding. Is it because the men and women have a different way of thinking and the communications? The reason gender is a female and male is a way of communication is a different. Is a kind to one to each other. So reason how to focus, how to causing of gender by fear shy. Isn't a woman sometimes you want to say on your shower of the way, but you where men is used to express it. So some incident, some environment to avoid of a communicative for women side, the environment misunderstanding to men and women. So how to overcome is a gap, gender bridge gap between gender of men and women. You create a deal of patience, understanding that only time and attention to will teach. Then organizational barrier. So organizational structure greatly affect the capability of the employee as far as the communication concern. There is the process of communication is a block the process of communication. Organizational barriers means is a discussed with like a restrictive and environment, dextrio and tax and communication of a network. These are the organizational communications barrier. Is what is the causing of an organizational barrier? It is a status relationship. Isn't a status of I am the boss, you are an it is a status, isn't a partiality for that one way of flow. Isn't a organized structure means isn't a boss, manager, director, manager, and the supervisor and labor leader, and some there is an organization such a structure to follow the rules and regulation. Too many levels of organizational structures. So how to overcome to that and a barrier? Isn't a poor barriers to avoid the poor barriers to the communication, to identify the weak delivery and a wrong medium to deliver the communication, mixed message, deliver to wrong audience, distracting the environment. These are the how to overcome of the perceptual barrier. The most common problem is that the people have different opinion. I give only one questions, but receiver is an also there's so many answer is that his idea is different from one person to another person. So have a different opinion of reply to on your center message. The varied perception of every individual give rise the need for on effective communication. Is a value, auditive, attitude, origins, experience that act the filter. Is the experience of people even the informations. There is an effective, there is the barriers. So one of the barriers. So the causing is the difference in understanding, because there isn't a one person to another person, there isn't a center give on one message, but reply feedback from one receiver is a differ. Isn't a differ from one one to one. Is a perception of one reality, value, attitude and the opinion. How to overcome for that and barrier. Is stored by listening to others. So I am the sender, you're in a receiver. I start with a clearly explain and communicate to one receiver. There is a confusion, there is no. Is there clarify the confusion? Stay calm and be positive. There is no emotion, there is no negative thought to one receiver. There is a calm and positive. There is a communication, the barriers to communication. So avoid for that communication to obstacles easily to one easily to communicate. So communication is in a relationship between two person, and one person is a receiver, another is a sender to a receiver. Sender is giving a message, the receiver is accepting the message. Thank you.